Chairs No Waiting, episode number 624. Frank E. Myers is not Mr. Schwamp. Two Chairs No Waiting is brought to you by the fine folks over at weaversdepartmentstore.com. Drop by over at Weavers and check out some of the great Mayberry items they have over there, like the Mayberry Favorites t-shirts. They have several of them. They got a pink one for you ladies. I guess for guys too. You know, real men wear pink. But head over there and check it out. They got great caricatures of Andy Griffith Show folks with no faces. But if you want a face, check out the Loaded Goat long sleeve t-shirts. They got those over at weaversdepartmentstore.com. Two Chairs No Waiting is also brought to you by donations from listeners like you. The executive producer of episode number 624 is Butch Ruffner. Thank you, Butch, for supporting Two Chairs No Waiting, and thank you for being here with me to talk about the Andy Griffith Show. And as I said, the title of this episode is Frank E. Myers is not Mr. Schwamp. I did say I'm Alan Newsome, didn't I? The host? Maybe I did, but I am. But Frank E. Myers is not Mr. Schwamp. I know that part. Whether I know my name or not, that's completely different. So my wife, in the last weekend, actually it came out on the 13th, which was, I think, Friday night. And so she found this, maybe that was Friday night, Saturday mornings when she found it. She found these articles that were appearing online that were basically saying that Frankie Myers was the guy who played Mr. Schwamp. There's a website out there that's called outsider.com, which obviously I'm not going to recommend particularly because they obviously don't fact check very well. But we're trying to jump on this as early as possible to try to stop it. I've already done some stuff. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to have some trivia as well. So stick around and we'll play a little bit of Mayberry trivia, just 5 questions. And then we'll hear from Randy Turner for this week in Mayberry History. So as I said, it's an article from a website called Outsider. I'm not going to provide a link in the show notes for this because I'm hoping it gets changed before anybody else sees it. So in this article that popped up in Jan's feed, it actually goes through and talking about Mr. Schwamp, which we all know. You know, Mr. Schwamp's the fella who sits around and never talks, and you know, fans embrace the mystery is what this article goes in to say about, you know, who is the guy, who is the character, who played him, and they've been questioning it for years. He was in 26 episodes is what it says here. Okay, so this is where the problem starts. This is where it starts. This writer, his name is Matthew Wilson. He goes on to say, as it turns out, the show's production manager, Frank E. Myers, played the role according to IMDb. What? Jan was, what is going on? She's sitting on the couch looking at me. What is this? Frank E. Myers. I was like, that's not right. Frank E. Myers. So I can't show you anymore what was actually on IMDb because I had them edit it. I've already tried to fix this. There is a section of IMDb that's called, is for the Andy Griffith Show itself. In that section, there's a trivia section for the Andy Griffith Show on IMDb. That's the Internet Movie Database, for those that don't know. And in the trivia section, there's all kinds of different little questions. And then one of them gets down to, it talks about Mr. Schwamp. Okay, so here's what it says now, and I'll read you what I had them remove. Okay, so I did have them remove a piece because it was not right, and they've already done it, it looks like. So here's what it actually says in that trivia. Throughout the series, there was a character named Mr. Schwamp who would occasionally appear in episodes. He was a middle-aged man with a slumped demeanor and dark hair, which kind of looks like a comb-over or a toupee. He could usually be found sitting on a park bench or in a crowd scene. He never had any lines. One of the characters, usually Andy or Barney, would acknowledge him with a, "Hello, Mr. Schwamp," and he would smile and nod. And that's all he would do. He also appeared on 2 episodes of the spinoff Gomer Pyle USMC. Okay, so that's what it says now. But what it said previous to that was, that I had them remove, it said the person who played him on the show was the production manager, Frank E. Myers, who was also the brother of the show's executive producer, Danny Thomas. Whoa, that isn't correct. That is incorrect. Incorrect. So I went into IMDb and went in to make a change and changed that and gave them the reasons as to why this is not correct. So Jan's the one that found this, and she found this article, and that's what this article referred to. There's this one entry by somebody in the trivia section of the Andy Griffith Show on IMDb, where they came up with this. You know, he's talking about Mr. Schwamp is Danny Thomas's brother, Frankie Myers. I was like, oh no, that is not true. That cannot be true. Let me look around and find out some information. So my first thought was, I'm going to find out Danny Thomas's brothers' names. Who is his brothers? Well, this is harder to do than I thought it would be. And I didn't have Danny's biography. I bet it was in there. But Danny had either 8 brothers and a sister or 9 brothers and a sister. Because out of 2 different places, I found 2 different numbers of how many siblings there were. But he had 9, he for certain had 8 brothers and a sister. Okay, so but the only brothers I could determine the names were, and some of you may know, and if you do know, hey, email me and let me know this, because I kind of searched around to try to determine that Frankie Myers was not Danny Thomas's brother. I didn't think he was. I was pretty sure he wasn't, but I thought this will be easy to disprove because I can just find who Danny's brothers really were. And so the fun part was I found out, we know that Danny Thomas is his original name. Well, I can't say, but he was renamed when he moved to America. They changed their name. He was actually Amos Jacobs was the name they went by in the United States. Their names from their home country when they moved here, I can't say them. I don't know how to say that, so I'm not even going to try. But Danny Thomas, he was originally Amos Jacobs was his name. Okay. So then he changed it to Danny Thomas, and Danny Thomas, he had pulled those names from his brothers, like his oldest brother and his youngest brother. His oldest brother was named Thomas Jacobs, and his youngest brother was named Danny Jacobs. So he became Danny Thomas, which I'm sure was confusing around the family dinner if you actually called him Danny. I assume they all called him Amos. But those were the only 3, those 3 brothers, plus the other brother is named Ray that Danny, then Amos, used to do a vaudeville show with. I found all that. So those were the only 4 of them, including himself, that I could determine who was the right, what were their names. I just realized there were 10 children. He had 8 brothers and 1 sister, plus himself. That's 9. I'm not good at math, am I? That's 9 brothers and a sister, 9 boys and a girl. That's 10. So 10 is the right number. Oh, me. Anyway, so I couldn't find it. I could not find out what Danny Thomas's brothers' names were. I was like, golly, Pete, this is a lot harder than I thought. I did find a cool picture of Danny Thomas's family. And the confusing thing was in the caption for the photo, it says, it's got Danny Thomas's father and his mother. You can spot them in the photo. And then it says Danny is sitting on the father's lap. I think his name is Charles. Well, at first I thought they meant Danny Thomas, but they probably meant Danny Jacobs because he's the youngest brother. He's the little boy in this picture, a little one. So that's his youngest brother, Danny. Not Danny Thomas, but Danny Thomas's youngest brother, Danny. Are y'all all confused? I know you are. Anyway, all this to be said, I was going around trying to determine who Frank E. Myers, what did he look like then, since I can't find him. So I looked him up on IMDb, and of course there are no photos or anything. So I spent several hours fooling around with that, and I don't know why I didn't do it, but I did eventually go and look in Jim Clark's books, and I was able to find a photograph of Frank E. Myers. So I found him, and there's a photo on page 196 of the book Mayberry Memories. If you have that book, I have a small one, And I also have a large hardback. This is the paperback version. And then there's a hardback version as well. They're hard to get. They're not really in print anymore. So if you have one, though, you could look on page 196 and you'll see a photo of Frank E. Myers. And there is a definite fact that Frank E. Myers does not look like Mr. Schwamp. So it is not him. So we were able to confirm it. I was like, all right. So I wrote Jim back and said, hey, I found him in your book. Hey, thank you. And so Jim then wrote me back and said, oh, yeah, that's not him. Frank E. Myers is not Danny Thomas's brother, which I was pretty sure of. And then he goes on to tell me, he said, yeah, I used to correspond and talk with Frank E. Myers a good bit. And in the bullet, that's the newsletter for the Andy Griffith Show Rewatchers Club, the January 26th, 1993 issue, there is a big story in here, Fond Memories from Mayberry, Frank Myers, with all kinds of photos and information about Frank Myers himself. Sadly, Jim had interviewed Frank Myers in early November of 92, and he passed away on, I believe it's the 28th. The 28th of November, later that month. Unexpected, it wasn't really expected. Sadly, he didn't get to ever see this nice article that Jim did based on the interview. But I'll just tell you a little bit about Frank Myers. His name was Francis Edward Myers, and he was born December the 10th, 1909. That date's significant to me because that's my birth date. Not 1909. I'm a few years later than that. But 1909, he was from Tifton, Ohio, which is just a little south of Toledo. And, it goes on talking about his brother and his sisters. He did a lot of work. If we read this article, he did a lot of work eventually at MGM Studios. He went to college before the Great Depression hit for 3 years at Michigan and was getting an engineering degree, but he had to drop out because of the Great Depression hitting. And so Frank went on and started working in jobs and stuff at places like MGM. The first job he took, he had to sneak into past the security guards to get a job at MGM back in 1937. He worked for $26.56 for a 6-day week. So he worked 6 days a week for $21.56. Busier weeks, he was working 125 hours for $40. Now, I just want everybody to hear that, right? That's complaining about what we're having to do now or our jobs. He worked 125 hours for $40. Now, I know there's inflation, but that's not a whole lot. But it wasn't long before Frank worked his way up to the position of a script supervisor, a post he held with MGM until 1943. And he began serving as an assistant director in films in the early 1940s. Somewhere in there, MGM asked him to go by Frank instead of Francis. His family still calls him Francis. They thought Francis sounded too sissy, is what Frank said. So I changed it to Frank, but I never really liked it as well. More importantly, during his early part of his career at MGM, the love of his life joined him in California, and they had met in the 1920s in Toledo, and they were married in 1937. And son Chuck was born in 1939, and Tom in 1942. Chuck himself, the son, has gone on to be an assistant director with credits like Close Encounter of the Third Kind, The Right Stuff, Coming Home, and the Bram Stoker's Dracula that came out in the early 90s. He was in there as well. He was also assistant director for Gomer Pyle USMC. And Tom, the other brother, other son, had a career of distinction in the Air Force and is a retired lieutenant colonel. So this is Frank E. Myers. There is so much information on here. He worked with people like Clark Gable, Heidi Lamar, Spencer Tracy. I mean, he worked with all these people, and he worked with Jimmy Stewart, Judy Garland, Lana Turner, Greta Garbo. I mean, it's just amazing his career that he had. And all this information is in this really wonderful write-up that Jim Clark did. So, as a teaser, there's some great information here about when he started working for the Andy Griffith Show. Now, remember, he started in 1930-something and didn't start with the Andy Griffith Show, obviously, until 1960s. So there is some great information in this that we are going to revisit next week and go through this article and give more information about Frank E. Myers. But Frank E. Myers is not Mr. Schwamp. So thank Mrs. Weaver for coming up with that information. That it was that is not who he was, and that she's the one that spotted that and immediately started digging in trying to find information. So we'll thank her for doing that. So
I want to add just real quickly, I'm sorry for interrupting your podcast. I did try to find the guy's information to email him to let him know so he could correct his article, and I could not find any information to email the guy. I did email the Outsider, and I got no response back from them. So I did try to contact them so they could fix their story, but I got no response back. So I did try to help them out, but anyway.
Thank you for that live report from Weaver's Apartment Store. Thank you. That was awesome. So she did try to dig around and get that information. So if you know Danny Thomas's brothers' names, I would like to get them because I don't have that. Brothers and sister. I couldn't seem to find that. But anyway, there is a biography for Danny Thomas out there, but I don't have a copy, and I couldn't find one in the short time I had. So anyway, thanks to Jan for pulling up this story. And next week, we're going to hear a little bit more about Frank E. Myers. I think you'll enjoy it. He's got a really nice story about Ron Howard in there and just working with Andy and how much he had enjoyed it. So that's a teaser. If you have that issue of January 26, 1993 of the Bullet, you can go and check it out. All right, so we're going to do now some trivia time. I need to get a little background music for us, don't I? A little trivia background music. I think this is a good one. There we go. So get your trivia hat on. And here we go. 5 trivia questions for fun. Everybody ready? So here we go. Number 1. Who gave out 14 traffic tickets in one day? Who gave out 14 traffic tickets in one day? Do you know the answer to this? Let's see how our chat room's doing here. Who gave out 14 traffic tickets in one day? The answer is, you can pause if you don't want to hear the answer. You can think about it. But the answer is Goober. Goober gave out 14 traffic tickets in one day. All right. Next up, number 2. There's only 5 questions, so see how you do. What was Opie's favorite short story? What was Opie's favorite short story? I don't think I knew this. No, it's not Tom Thumb. It's a short story, not short person. All right. What was Opie's favorite short story? All right. The answer is The Headless Horseman. The Headless Horseman, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. That was it. Okay. So you'll get credit for either one of those. All right. Next up. What was the maximum wattage light bulb allowed in Mrs. Mendelbright's in the rooms that she rented? What was the maximum wattage light bulb allowed by Mrs. Mendelbright in the rooms that she rented? Okay, we should know that one. Bowl snatcher. Mrs. Mendelbright. Oh. What was the maximum wattage of light bulb allowed by Mrs. Mendelbright in the rooms that she rented? It was 40 watts. The chat room is getting that one all over the place. Good job, chat room. Number 4. Oh, you've got to get this one. You've got to get this one. What was the winning raffle number that Andy pulled out of the hat? What was the winning raffle number that Andy pulled out of the hat? Okay, what was the raffle number? Henry Bennett. I'll give you What was the raffle number? What was it? Oh, this is a good one. All right. The answer is, it's not 6 7/8. That's not it. That's what Henry pulled out. The answer of what was the winning raffle number that Andy pulled out, it was 44. 44. It's 44. Look what you got there in your hand. It's 44. 44. What you got there? What's your number, Henry? What's your number? 6 7/8. Oh, Andy. He pulled out the hat size. All right, our final question. What was the phone number of the Taylor house? Ooh, that's a hard one. What was the phone number of the Taylor home, or Taylor's house? Andy's house. What was the phone number? What was the phone number at Andy's house? Ooh, that's kind of hard. I don't know. I wouldn't have known this. I would have said the phone number is, Sarah, get me my house. But that's not right. That's not it. All right. So the phone number at Andy's house is 426. 426. 426. Did you get that one? That one's kind of hard. I mean, that one was not an easy one. All right. So how'd you do? I see Jim Sherrill in the chat room. He got it. So we're getting some folks that are getting that one. 426. Of course, Jim is a Mayberry Days trivia champion. So congratulations. I've kind of figured. Matter of fact, Jim said, I'm not sure all the answers are right, because I'm worried one of them, he didn't get the same answer that's on this sheet. So I'm worried that it's wrong. So if you think one of the answers was wrong, send me a note and let's look it up and find out and be sure. Because I didn't make up the questions or the answers. I'm just reading them. Okay. I'm claiming not guilty. But I think they're right. They're close. If they're not, we'll fix them. All right, guys, let's go and hear from Randy Turner for his great report that we always have. So take it away, Randy. Did I not? I didn't load Randy's report. So let me fix that. So we're going to hear from Randy Turner in just a minute. I want to thank Randy, by the way, for all the amazing work he's done over the years, just pulling all this content together. I have so much enjoyed the Sheldon Leonard reports that he's been doing. So let's go and see if we can get this to play now, and we'll listen to it.
Welcome to This Week in Mayberry History, a report by Special Correspondent Randy Turner of the Gomer and Cooper Pyle Comic Book Literary Guild of the Mayberry Historical Society.
This week we will conclude our deep dive into the career of the great Sheldon Leonard, leading up to his creation of The Andy Griffith Show. Sheldon first directed a television episode that he also wrote for the anthology show Your Jeweler Showcase in 1952. He directed 2 more episodes of the series, wrote 4 more, and received a producer's credit for a 1953 episode. He directed 4 episodes of another anthology show, General Electric Theater, in 1953, one of which he also wrote, and another in which he also acted. It is little wonder that Sheldon is often described as a Renaissance man in entertainment. The next major event in Sheldon's career was to be a life changer. The networks were anxious to broadcast as many comedy shows as possible, but there was a shortage of competent directors available. The William Morris Agency approached Sheldon about representation for his abilities as a director based on his demonstrated proficiency. Within just a few days, he was brought onto a new show, Make Room for Daddy. Initially, the series star Danny Thomas did not get along with Sheldon, but within a few months realized what a successful pairing they made. Sheldon came to Thomas's series as a director. He began directing with an episode that aired November the 10th, 1953, and by the time the long-running show ended, Sheldon had directed an incredible 282 episodes. During his first 3 years on the series, the multi-talented Sheldon also found time to direct the 1954 pilot and several of the first episodes of the series Lassie. He also continued to act. He played Gus in a 1953 episode of Make Room for Daddy and was a regular in the summer replacement series The Duke in 1954. He also appeared in previously discussed Damon Runyon projects and in a 1954 episode of It's a Great Life with series regular Francis Bavier. At the end of the third season of Make Room for Daddy, Sheldon also became the series producer to oversee various aspects of the show after the original producer left. Late in 1959, Sheldon was asked by William Morris president and agent Abe Lastfogel to try to come up with a series idea for Lastfogel's newest client, Andy Griffith. Sheldon and Artie Stander, a writer on The Danny Thomas Show, discussed ideas, but it was Sheldon who had to make the final call, and in doing so, he created the series that would eventually be known as The Andy Griffith Show. Sheldon also came up with the idea to introduce Griffith's character of Sheriff Andy Taylor in an episode of The Danny Thomas Show as a way to economically film a pilot for use as an episode of the ongoing series, thereby creating another television first, what is now called a backdoor pilot. Sheldon also directed the pilot episode. When the series was picked up by sponsor General Foods before the pilot even aired, the business arrangements that had been made called for Sheldon and Danny Thomas to be executive producers of the new series with a financial share in the show. Thomas freely admitted that he had no real involvement in the development of the Andy Griffith series, and that all was left up to Sheldon. Sheldon hired Aaron Rubin as a story consultant and writer, a move that certainly shaped the direction of the show, as Rubin is considered to have been the guiding and driving force of the series. Sheldon also directed the credit sequences and the first episode, The New Housekeeper. The show was an instant hit that never left the top 10 during its entire 8-year run. While this installment wraps up our deep dive into how Sheldon's career shaped the creation of the Andy Griffith Show, we will spend 2 more installments, sort of a postscript, to wrap up a full look at his career. But first, we're going to take a week off to look next week at a different topic. I don't do these deep dives often, but I hope you've enjoyed this more extensive look at the genius of Sheldon Leonard. So that's it for this week. As always, thanks for listening, and remember to take care of yourself, take care of others, and take Andy's advice, and go out there and act like somebody.
Wow, thank you, Randy. And if you want to make sure you don't miss out on any of the great stuff Randy's doing with the Andy Griffith Show online, send him an email at turnersgrade@gmail.com, turnersgrade@gmail.com, and he'll make sure you don't miss out on anything. So great job, Randy. And wow, it was a cliffhanger he left us with. He didn't even tell us what next week's going to be. We're just taking a break to do something different. Man, that's going to be big. I don't know what it is, but y'all have to come back just to listen to that. So good job, Randy. So I'm teasing you that next week we're going to talk about Frank Myers, and Randy's teasing us with something that he's going to break into his Sheldon Leonard report on to talk about next week. Wow, that's some good lead-in stuff. Folks, I hope you have enjoyed the podcast and enjoyed yourself. It's always fun for me to be here and to just try to talk about the Andy Griffith Show and enjoy ourselves. I hope you'll enjoy us anytime you can. You can join us on Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern time at live.twochairsnowaiting.com and be a part of the live show. We got 50 folks in our chat room in here visiting with one another and having a good time. We'd love to have you join in with us. They visit and talk throughout the entire show, and it's great. And I just want to thank the folks that help support the show as well. patrons over at patreon.com. You can go to patreon.com/2chairs and support the show. And I would love to hear from you. So give me a call at 888-684-8415. And we'll see you guys next week right here on Two Chairs. Good night, everybody. I talked past my music. Good night, guys.